I've been waiting 5 years for this day to come. 5 long years, and now it's here. You know, a long time ago, we started this whole joke where we would do like this big Twin Peaks thing, and, well, the guy kind of fucked it up, and we never really got to finish the gag. But, hey, we're here now, so now we can finish it, because when's a better time to do a Twin Peaks reference than in 2024? We'll just have to, oh, I hear him coming. Here he comes. Wait, what's going on? Let's go. Oh my
Very
god!
adorable Larson. Very adorable Larson. A red panda from Timu Flame Broiling Hamburgers.
5 years. 5 goddamn years I've been waiting for this game to release with not but a demo that came out so goddamn long ago I don't even remember when it actually hit. And holy fuck has it been an excruciating wait. But to get everyone caught up, a long ass fucking time ago at this point, a title I absolutely love, a Norse-themed sci-fi horror title, Absolov End of Gods released, and hot diggity daffodil was it good. So good that I checked out their previous work, Unforgiving: A Northern Hymn. And then an announcement came for a game that would be completely different to everything they had worked on before, and the wait began. How excruciating of a wait did we have? It had no release date for 90% of the time, and then it suddenly got a release date but only mentioned the year, then that got changed back to TBA, and then just a few short months ago we got our final trailer and launch date announcement, and now we've gotten our pause on it. Let me just scroll down here for a second. You didn't see any of that. Not just moving on from mythological sci-fi horror and into a much more cartoony style, they were branching out into a full 7th gen mascot action platformer. Think your Dak and Jacksters, your Ferrero Rocher und Clonks, My Spooky Cousin Vinny's, and Blinks, the Time Sweeper. Developed by Angry Doom... I'm just fucking it up all over the place, aren't I, everybody? Developed by Angry Demon Studio, who I already mentioned their previous titles, and published by Wired Productions, the publishers of... Martha is Dead.
Why are we still here?
You know what? Let's just skip that part. Either way, classic video game comedy, action, and unmitigated slaughter were absolutely on their way, and Jesus fucking Christ, it didn't just meet my hype, but it blew my expectations completely out of the water. Yeah! It's gonna be one of those glizzy glazing episodes, so shut the fuck up and roll that MLP AMV so we can pounce right into Gori, Cuddly Carnage. It's a cat with a hoverboard, fighting unicorns.
Against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, we will send unto them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
Attempting to acquire the Hell Priest signal.
Nearly 60% of our planet has been consumed by the invaders.
Locked in. The target is marked, but the signal will not hold for long.
For it is he that they fear, not man, or his armies. They fear the mark of the beast.
the proverbial dipshit playing this game, but me, the literal, assume direct control of the vessel known as Gori, which is an anagram for Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
And you find yourself orbiting a pale blue dot when shit hitteth yonder fan, and you dive down to the surface in search of a new ship and the professor who created you. A quick note, you acquire a teleporter, but Gori, believing that's too lame, chooses to continue leaping out of the airlock and comes screaming through the goddamn atmosphere at the start of every level. And for his next trick, he's going to skate Dead Man's Curve without a helmet, proving to the jocks who the real badass is, and winning the right to ask Becky to the prom. As you search the ruined city, you quickly find some sort of horrible apocalypse has befallen the Earth, and the once proud Furby ranks have been replaced by the various meth-addled ranks of the insane Unicorn Posse. Cool, I guess. Quickly, our little kitty is introduced to the general of the adorable army Baronovox, and he's here to swear at you relentlessly and also maybe inflict violence upon you. I don't know. Let's see where the night takes us. You, being a cat in league with a depressed AI and an over-enthusiastic hoverboard that also doubles as your instrument of unremitting cruelty, decide that's not gonna fly because it's a hover, and begin the search for the parts to complete a massive laser because you're a cat, and also said laser is a WMD. Along the way, you are joined by Goldfin, a German goldfish, and his wife Gretchen, and the horrible truth is revealed that the longer Pink Bunny is on Earth, the stronger it becomes.
The longer the icon of sin is on Earth, the stronger he will become.
The story is simple and direct. Professor White invented 2 new toys in the Ultra Pet line. They're marketed as toys, but they're really sentient animals, and for some reason they're filled with blood and guts and think and feel. And is it the blood that makes them sentient, and is this the deep lore linking it to Ultra Kill? I don't know. Anyway, essentially everything that happened and will happen is 100% the professor's fault and the consequences of the pity she took on the plight of Pink Bunny, but she feels kinda bad about it and it's more of a prepare for unforeseen consequences type of situation, so let's not go too hard on the poor girl. It's not really all that deep and it's kind of punctuated by cliches. The ship's AI being depressed naysayer isn't a new thing, and Seth MacFarlane is tragically ubiquitous to American pop culture, so a German goldfish isn't a route I would have gone personally. But they're not played in the manners our various regions of pop culture would dictate, so at least I'm not being constantly reminded of their more famous counterparts. It's a bit of foreshadowing, but the game wears its inspirations on its sleeve, but in no way lets them dictate the experience, but we'll come back to that later. The story does what it needs to tug at the player's heartstrings just enough to hype them up for the slaughtering of the countless hordes of ponies to save the good doctor and right that which once went wrong, and give our heroes their nice action game arc. It's an older school mascot action game. The deep lore and events that led up to now aren't as important as what you actually get to partake in. Suffice to say for now that the game is more comedic while letting the levity in where it needs to be to help it not be a completely irreverent romp. Somewhere between Saints Row 2 and Devil May Cry, the glorified quote-unquote king of cool action star, coming face to face with the monsters who just absolutely hate him for some reason, getting just serious enough that it ties the narrative and the player's investment together. There is a bit of an over-reliance on the word fuck, and far be it for me to complain about that, as while the game is a gory mess of violence and death and thus receives a mature rating, I think they wanted to walk a very fine line to hit that M-rated game that you can give to the younger generations, because who the fuck didn't sneak into R-rated movies and play GTA before they were 15? And I'll circle back to that later, as the game treads a very strong, fun for most ages as long as you're over 10 line. Graphically speaking, the game is an absolute powerhouse. It's not super demanding unless you want to run ray tracing, but it really exemplifies how aesthetic crafting and attention to detail are going to be far more powerful weapons in your arsenal. The neon comic book styling paired with the setting of toys taking over the world is absolutely packed with detail, which is something Angry Demon Studio have only gotten better at with each game they release. Every frame is packed to the brim with details, small, large, and completely background that really sell each environment as a place that has been lived in, trashed, worked in, etc. From the background monitors warning about various errors on the ship in the opening cutscene that the player just wants to read but never really gets the chance to the various graffiti and stickers slapped everywhere, nothing ever feels empty or overlooked, and it's all tied together with not just the aesthetic and setting crafting, but each level having their own themes. If you've played Psychonauts, Ratchet & Clank, Madness Returns, or the like, you get it. It's the games you thought they just don't make them like they used to, and I've been telling you for years that they do, you just keep looking at the wrong studios, and here it is now, and it's better than it's ever been. Each level's theme ties everything into its design, from new enemies, challenges, environments, and even the soundtrack, and I'm all bricked up to talk about that one. Level 2, for example, features you entering skyscraper-sized arcade machines and thus traversing circuit boards, air hockey tables, yada yada. Level 7 is inside Gori's psyche, and you travel across massive yarn strands and floating furniture, and even scale a colossal cat, house, tree, whatever the fuck you call those things that you spend $300 on in 2 days building just for your cat to sit in the box that it came in instead. Whatever. Level design is never very complicated and traversal since your methods of travel are limited to the hoverboard, but between rails and electric billboards, the levels each have their own themed paths you travel with, really only the floating platforms being big. Oh, okay. They're just kind of there and don't ever really follow any themes. When it comes to talking about the levels, I'll leave that more for once we get into gameplay and how it all comes together, and I'll leave it off for right now because I really could spend hours talking about each level, but between the writing, dialogue, and each individual level, it would take literal hours to really tell it all, and I'm just not smart enough to do so without being an absolutely boring as fuck man. I can barely make it 10 minutes without repeating myself 4 times. I will say though, as far as everything goes, screenshots and promo pics just do not do this game any level of justice. Bear in a Box looks kind of uncanny and freeze frame, but when you actually get him in front of you and you see it all in motion, it's absolutely stunning. YouTube and various social media platforms already bit crunch the hell out of a video, but even with as high a bitrate as I record and render at, it still loses a lot of the fidelity. Nothing short of sitting down and playing it truly shows off just how magnificent the work that went into the game is. There isn't a single lacking texture, model, animation, or effect. None of it. Gori kind of stands out a bit, but not because he's bad looking, just that he looks like an actual cat with a bit of a larger head. It's goofy sometimes, once it's actually in action and you're playing, it looks fucking great. Every detail is given the care it needed to be either forefront or just background enough to not distract the player, even in the quieter moments of gameplay. It's kind of insane to think that a game so bright, poppy, and filled with detail never has any assets that just stick out and draw undue attention, but it just goes to show that the studio's expertise in crafting the game in the world. It's a labor of love on levels so few games will ever hope to achieve, and will stand, at least in my heart, as a benchmark of what the independent or AA sector is capable of alongside greats like Elderborn and Blood West, and even titles like Angerfoot and Children of the Sun. I do have to point out, even though it most likely has been fixed by this point, that the ray tracing borked it all completely for me. I started the game with it on, and in the opening cutscene it blew the image out by giving everything this obscenely aggressive glow, and then when the first level kicked off, the game crashed so hard, I had to cut power to the PC to close it. It stomped Windows nuts in entirely. Which was weird, but the good news is I am mostly convinced ray tracing is just a gimmick for making games perform worse, and in no way is it ever needed. Today's treat utilizes fidelity and style better than any AAA game I've played since Angry Demon's last title came out that wasn't Monster Hunter World on PC, and just goes to show yet again that you don't need to go, but can it run Crysis levels of graphical technology to really hammer home just what we've become capable of. I fucked it up, daddy. The such sights to show you that Doug Bradley famously promised are fucking phenomenal, but as I always like to say, graphics are meaningless if the gameplay is shit. It's a classic action platformer, so your options are numbered just enough to be satisfying, with higher difficulties opening avenues for players to get really into chaining those options together. You are on a hoverboard, and Gori will slide around with just enough momentum to nail the feeling, adding in just enough conservation of momentum to force the player to quickly think when a jump takes them further than they wanted to go. As you traverse levels, you start to learn just how far and high you can begin to push everything and start skipping small segments, allowing the player to natively learn the various tricks for hitting those time speeds for gold medals. Jumping between billboards and jumping off early to launch yourself to a higher platform that otherwise required an extra minute or so of traversal becomes second nature to the player. If ludonarrative dissonance is a character saying something in contradiction to the gameplay, then ludonarrative harmony is exemplified in a rad skateboarding cat teaching the player to skip otherwise mundane travel. Game design dictates that the best way to teach a player is through hiding the lessons, and with traversal and later to be discussed combat, the developers took great measures to make sure every single bit of exploration is being punctuated by teaching the player the finer details of the core mechanics. You are learning to be the cool cat who saves the kids the story that asks you to play as. For instance, a chase sequence will have the player shooting targets to open paths, but one of the barriers will be just high enough that you can double jump over if you have the presence of mind to notice, but it may actually be a second or two faster to shoot the target. Swag strat or intentional quick decision conditioning, only the devs can truly say. Your methods of travel outside of holding forward involve jumping, double jump, grind, wall ride, and a dodge. The dodge doesn't just help the player in combat, it can also be used to course correct when launching off a rail or wall forces your trajectory in a direction you didn't fully want to go. Traversal hazards are pretty few and far between and will mostly take the form of pits, targets to shoot mid-grind, and the aforementioned chase sequences. Rail grinds and wall rides will refill the boost bar, which does what the name says, but can also be expended for a few more powerful attacks. Each level is mostly pretty simple in its design, almost linear, but each path is built so that you grow more and more comfortable with the mechanics. You will naturally develop the ability to sight read segments and take them faster than you normally would have. Being rad is the name of the game, figuratively speaking, and what's more rad than hot sweaty speed? Obviously a game that, through simply putting a player in the level, teaches them to get the most out of that hot sweaty speed. Also unbridled mayhem. That tends to be better, if not just as good as said stinky velocity. Combat in this game is centered around stylish score attack action, but rather than focusing on a wide variety of weapons and skills, Angry Demon focused down on getting the player taking the action faster with what they have, rather than having to learn that jumping with Beowulf equipped auto parries. Gori has a light attack, a heavy attack, a rocket launcher, and can burn boost fuel for special attacks, of which you have 3. The longest a combo will get is 3 inputs, putting its combo options behind even Warrior Within, even when ignoring the disarming options that game had. It's incredibly simple to get into from an action standpoint, but it's how they are utilized, the core mechanics of them, and how those options are chained together where the game opens up to the player. In isolation, Gori appears to attack kind of slowly, and input timing seems a little jank for chaining between light and heavy. But isolation is not how the game is played. Quickly you learn that while an animation may seem slow, the actual active hitbox and input timing melds into the speed of the game once an encounter starts. Basic unicorns, shooty corns, and the flappy corn die in one hit. Slicey corns get stunned from a heavy attack, which opens them up for glory kills or more combos. Using a boosted heavy attack will launch slicey corns into the air and suspend them, allowing the player to jump, hit the light attack, zip right to the target, and kill them in one hit as if they were lower tier enemies. A charged aerial heavy smash will instantly kill slicey corns, even if they have the bubble shield. The spinny guys, whose name I forget, are best handled with missiles, and tend to bunch up, giving 2 charge shots with massive AoE the tool of choice for quickly dealing with them. Heavy enemies like the disembodied hands and the demonicorns can be knocked out of whatever the hell they're doing at the time with a charge shot and instantly brought into the stun state so you can work on their health bars. Super heavies always have a special gimmick that you can chain attacking other enemies with to prioritize them when you want to, or simply stun them while clearing out a horde of flappycorns so they don't interrupt you with their bombs. The seahorse enemies have low health, but they don't die in one hit, give other enemies shields, and if you don't kill them quickly will dash away and throw down bubbles that slow the player. They die in one charge shot and they can be stunned with certain attacks, but the overall method of their introduction comes in being sort of an ace up the sleeve on the encounter. No matter what is on the field, if they show up, you have to prioritize them, despite them being rather weak, because they can very quickly cause you to become overwhelmed. And in the vein of the game constantly forcing the player to learn its mechanical intricacies, they are introduced underwater, where you can't shoot them with missiles and your boosted attacks don't get their full effectiveness, forcing the player to learn in an isolated incident exactly how they work, how dangerous they are, and the threat priority that they take. Further amazing design with these enemies is after the level they are introduced, I don't recall them being fought underwater ever again. There's no point to anyway, the message has been drilled into the player's head, and they've adapted. The variety of enemies is pretty large, all things considered, and even up to the final level before the boss fight with the icon of Adorable, new ones are being introduced, giving the player not just new challenges when combined with different heavies and super heavies, but forcing them to adapt strategies as well. I mentioned how attacks outside of combat look and feel like they're kinda slow, but once an encounter kicks off proper and Gori is magnetizing to one-shot targets, dodge canceling a heavy attack, or whipping the screen 180 degrees to blast a target, you start to feel the fluidity beginning to open itself up. What looks rather slow and sometimes questionable outside of the action becomes faster than you were ready to manage, but even quicker guides the player into the full options that are available to them. I mentioned Gori will zip around toward a close enough airborne target. He can even chain these attacks to multiple airborne targets, and what starts as just mashing X and zipping between them turns into stunning a heavy from the air, holding the boost and light attack to engage blender mode, whipping around wildly midair to kill 6 flappycorns, and restocking on missiles, ending with hitting the ground, melting the heavy's health bar, all while your style meter is shooting up faster than the stonks can keep up with. A note here, by the way, is that the zip attack that one-shots weaker enemies also refills your dodge and jump. A small array of combat options allowed to be quickly and fluidly tied together against a wide range of enemies with their own strategies to take down creates just this amazing spectacle of absolute mayhem. Dig, if you will, a picture. Level 2 gives the player the rocket launcher and introduces flappycorns. About 5 minutes later, the player is thrown into an encounter with a slowly descending insta-kill ceiling. In this room are 2 targets. Shoot one and the descent pauses for a short time. Once both targets are shot, the ceiling resets. In this encounter, flappycorns are spawning by the shitload. What this room is doing very early on in the game isn't just showing how the rocket launcher can be utilized, it's teaching the player the prioritization of targets. You can shoot both targets right away. You can also shoot one, yet be able to safely let the timer run down while your rockets refill and take the second target once the ceiling gets too low. Or you can let the timer run nearly out, shoot one target, kill a flappycorn to instantly refill a rocket, shoot the other, then tackle the demonicorn that just spawned. All dressed up in an 80s retro arcade game, lampshading the fact that this room is actively tutorializing the player on what is available to them and teaching them about different levels and techniques of prioritization combined with encounter awareness. This room is never repeated, by the way, because to complete it, you are forced to learn these intricacies, so you never really need to repeat it as newer super heavies and encounter designs combined with an increase in difficulty are already recreating it, just without the ceiling. And Sony ponies are just wondering how they were taught all this in the second goddamn level without a single drop of yellow paint. And Jesus fucking Christ, it's so sadistically satisfying. Very few games, even in the more complex genres, manage to craft combat that feels as good as Gori does when the encounters kick off full in a level. The absolute carnage and the speed at which you navigate it is a performance art display of blood and swirling razor blades.
Let's do the fork in the garbage disposal. Let's do the fork in the garbage disposal. Ding 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 ding.
And the W's just keep racking up because the soundtrack is fucking epic. Being that Sweden has been the de facto home for all things metal for a quarter of a goddamn century now, it only makes sense that this Swedish slaughterfest has a crunchy, absolutely hype metal soundtrack, but it's not just that it's metal, it's practically a concept album. The crunchy guitars, roaring bass, and absolute death machine that is the percussion takes the lead in most action tracks, but each level has not just its own themes in design, enemies, and atmosphere, but in the musical composition as well. The first level features a child's xylophone and bells to represent the toys, a theremin to represent sci-fi horror settings, and the metal composition bringing the core throughout for the apocalyptic violence to come. However, as you play the levels, each battle track pushes the guitar and drums further back, bringing forward the themed instruments as you get closer to the boss. For level 1, this means more theremin and child's instruments as you get closer to the end, and those taking the lead role relegating the git fiddle to the background rhythm as you fight the boss. In level 2, which is a retro arcade themed, chirps and chimes emulating classic video game sound effects and jingles make up the flair of the track. By the second track, they are pushed even further so that the metal is played alongside it as baseline rhythm. But by the time you reach General Flyball, the metal has taken a major backseat, giving over to the electronic composition, creating a track somewhere between EDM performing filthy death metal breakdowns. Level 3 continues this compositional insanity. You're infiltrating the toy factory only to confront the AI that acts as the manager. It's an Etch-a-Sketch, and it's a child, and children swearing will never not be funny.
Are you guys fucking serious? I had one condition. 1 is the easiest number to remember. I hope you like my new toys. Not. Kid? I'm a goddamn manager.
Anyway, as it's a toy voiced by a child and the manager acts very childlike, and the final boss is a ladybug, the tracks for this level use more of the xylophone but also incorporate whimsical reed instruments. The metal pounds its industrial tones and melodies, punctuating the gory slaughter, while the whimsical, almost cartoon theme song complements them, reminding the player that this is truly ultra-violence, but thematically, it's still essentially just toy theater. It's embracing itself, agreeing with the player that the premise is a little goofy and coming together with them to agree to just accept it and let the fun flow from every orifice and pore on your gross human body. And it goes on! The sticky stealth infiltration themes of Goldfin's Museum, the bombastic carnival themes threatening to break out a missile launch in Calliope for the final assault against Barnabox, the foreboding, pounding, surreal composition of The Nightmare, and all with tracks that progress and change in what takes the lead in composition, helping tell the story to the player's progression throughout the level. Holy fuck, it's killer! But it's not just hardcore, it's the height of video game composition, and I will fight to the absolute death anyone who has anything bad to say about it. Few games nail it this well these days. Excuse me. Oh look, it's an Easter egg for longtime fans. Go play Unforgiving, a Northern Hymn to learn more. So the final question becomes, how does it all look when taken together? What truly is the experience like when everything is playing its part, and how do they all play off of each other? Phenomenally! It's the height of action slaughter. It is the pinnacle of love, care, dedication, and downright devotion to making just some of the best goddamn games the industry has seen to date. Chip, the ship's AI, slowly coming around to seeing the brightness of our future. Frank doubling as the player's stand-in and hype man. Goldfin is also there, and the time has finally fucking come. A toy-themed sci-fi horror action platformer inspired by its predecessors but never constrained by them, in a genre that has long been abandoned by AAA but never by the players. Ripped, scratching, and hissing into a new era that only the independent scene can produce. A complex system of themes, atmospheric designs, artistic exploration, and convergence, punctuated by gameplay that has spent its full runtime teaching the player not just its little intricacies, but the greater notes of how to become absolute hell on wheels. I'm here at the final boss fight, charge slamming 5 slicey corns to death, dodge, jump to get away from the heavy, dash and cut down 3 flappy corns, turn 180 degrees and charge out the heavy to stun him, turn back around and whip out the shield to block some bullets, heavy attack to kill the shielded shooty corn, boosted heavy attack to launch 3 slicey corns, jump, dash through all 3, rendering them into little bite-sized chunks, dodge, turn 180 degrees and shoot a tentacle, dodge back to the stunned heavy and engage Cuisinart blender mode, all in less than 10 fucking seconds, while a murderous soundtrack blares its exaltation of my coming, the unstoppable beast of extermination the game has spent the runtime training me to become, finally unleashed at my peak and at the end of the road, and you may be a giant pink bunny, but you're also a massive douche weasel, and I'm a short order cook serving up razor blade nightmares in a greasy spoon centered in the tri-state area formerly known as the Viance Layer of Hell! Order up, meow there, fucker! Fuck! Yeah! But I do have 2 major complaints. The boss of level 7 kinda sucks, in my opinion. You attack yarn balls to slowly, excruciatingly slowly, reduce its stun gauge, then you go through a short series of extraneous combats, then you get to work on its health, then it heals itself and you have to climb up to start process 1 again, now over pits that damage you if you fall into them, while the camera is constantly whipping itself wildly, making you lose control. Do phase 1 in its entirety again, but now up here, go through it again, then engage blender to kill. Only problem is the yarn balls emit lasers if you don't hit them quick enough, so a phase that is already slow is now slower, and on higher difficulties they fire faster. If you let the yarn balls fire, they enter a phase of invincibility where you get hurt if you hit them, and I repeat, on higher difficulties they fire faster. So it just makes that segment take even longer. Then add in the fact that for some reason in phase 1 the lasers have this nasty habit of fucking being invisible, and on Cuddly Carnage difficulty you have to do phase 2 twice. It's a tedious hurry up and wait bullshit, and it's not very fun, and no, you can't shoot the yarn balls, they're immune to rockets and the charged shot. My second major gripe is that a level is missing. After you complete the orbital laser and kill Bear in a box, Gori gets infected with a serum that Pink Bunny used to create the adorable army. Level 7 takes place inside Gori. It's the Psychonauts, defeat what's inside you kind of level, that level where Gori has to face the truth, the doubt, and overcome it all to become the hero the story needs him to be. And he does. And then you're just thrown into the final boss fight. Usually after that level, you have what I like to call the Nightmare Apotheosis, the level where the new enemies stop being introduced, the core mechanics are the main focus, all the challenges have their highest requirements, and the devs will work with the player to actively craft increasingly insane combat challenges that truly exemplify the foretold apocalypse, and just relish in the journey up to this point as they assault the last lines of defense the final boss has. But the game doesn't have that. It spends all this time introducing new enemies and drilling into the player the finer points of what they can do without ever letting it be known that that's what's happening, and it just really feels like it skips a level that should be there. Playing through a game doesn't just mean experiencing the narrative, experiencing a game creates one in itself. Games are meant to be completed, that's why they end with the names of the people who made it, not the people who beat it. The developers taught us the entire time how to get the most out of the game, but they forgot that they can also develop a level or two that works with the player to really show off how much they've learned. These levels usually have the most combat, the highest combo requirements, etc., and they just kind of forgot to make it. There is no massive end-of-the-world level combat events that make me go, fuck yeah, I just scored 3.5 million off of one combo. It's just apotheosis, final boss, classic hype escape sequence celebrating the journey, and make no mistake, that escape sequence is fucking hype, but still, It needed that level in my opinion, or at least some form of Cuddly Palace, because the game doesn't really get much harder on Cuddly Carnage difficulty, and the side challenge maps don't really put much extra out there either. It's fine. It means the game has a low barrier of entry and a decent enough skill ceiling that just about anyone with enough investment will 100% it eventually without too much frustration. I just wanted that extra bit to truly show off what I'm capable of, not just to myself, but the devs as well. Game development and play can be far more collaborative than we give it for, but the game, in classic fashion, has a secret tease if you rescue all the uninfected unicorns, teasing a possible sequel or expansion, so with hope, that's where I will get my wish, but as it is, that could just be personal preference, but the level 7 boss is objectively pretty lame at best. Just a few extra things before we begin the wrap-up proper. The game has plenty of customization unlocks for the player, including photo filters, fur patterns, and more. I mentioned multiple times how the game is fun for most ages, and it's not just the writing and ease of entry for the gameplay. I may be unfathomably incompetent, but after completing the second level on House Cat, the game's default normal difficulty, I decided to restart on Alley Cat, this game's version of hard. The base difficulty was kind of boring me, which means if you are not really accustomed to the stylish action genre, you'll probably find it a great way to ease yourself into the game, and will be a good entry point. Alley Cat mostly didn't wow me in the level of challenge though. Case in point, I only died once throughout my playthrough, and that came during the boss fight against the Doll Queen, when for some reason my brain turned off and I just did not care to avoid damage at that point. So while Alley Cat was easy enough for me, someone who was practically drowning in Devil May Cries and Bayonettas, the game did still punish me for my lack of care in that instance. It got more satisfying near the end, but really it wasn't until I was acquiring the medals for completing time requirements and the Cuddly Carnage difficulty at the same time that I was getting the most out of the difficulty. And the good news is, if you are struggling, you can lower the difficulty in the options menu mid-level. It's a low barrier to entry and relatively low skill ceiling, but its satisfying nature and much more relative difficulty open it a lot more than many of its contemporaries can. And that's Gori, Cuddly Carnage, which isn't just a title, but a play on words promising an absolutely brutal slaughterfest. It's Cuddly Carnage that also is filled with gore. It was an absolutely excruciating 5-year wait at times, but my god was every minute of said wait absolutely worth it. Aside from that one boss, everything is far better than I could have ever dreamed, even with that demo having been available. The craftsmanship and attention to detail have paid off phenomenally. It's only $22, and it's available on literally every platform, and physical editions are coming soon. It's available on PS4 and Xbone, but I think they're running a survey to see if it would be feasible to really release physical editions on them. I can complain about the level 7 boss all day, but it's really not terrible, just kind of lame compared to the absolutely fun and engaging gimmicks of the other bosses. It's literally just a low moment, and it's the only one. That level I say is missing, it's just personal taste, and just means that it's left me absolutely screaming for more, and there may just be more coming. We have to wait and see. More than any game I've showcased, this one I think everyone who picks it up will enjoy the ever-loving piss out of, and if you don't, fuck you! I'm the Necroswanson, and you can go fuck yourself!